Okay, so what this saw is going to be is just yet another one of my iterations of aftermarket stuff. I just trued this cylinder up. This was a Hyway cylinder, and it doesn't look bad to me. I mean, it's not perfect, but it doesn't look bad as aftermarket cylinders go. Has a little bit of heft, you know. That's kind of squared off, you know, the petition and the transfers. Those are things you can work at, you know. Nice looking combustion chamber and nice looking plating. So that part of it looks pretty good. And compression more than anything else is what matters on these little saws, you know. Unless you get into a lot of time and money. You can get more punch out of a change in compression than you can out of just about anything else based on time spent. This is a Cross brand wrist pin bearing. So I think what we're going to do first is put that piston on without the rings and just start taking a look at what we have for Squish. Okay, I've kind of run into another issue, and that's the cylinder casting interferes with the flywheel. See, that's what I can deal with for run out. Now when I set that cylinder on there and snug it up, you know, make sure this doesn't move, I check. And then I check the run out after I'm done to make sure it hasn't moved. And that's how I check to make sure that the cylinder bore is square to the base. Is when you trim relative to that, and this is, you know, pretty square, nothing's perfect, but you get a pretty good idea. And that's what I found with a lot of these aftermarket ones where, I mean, they're not off terrible, but they're off. And by trimming the base, you get them closer to being on. Now I put an OEM on there, they're square, you know. Alright, I took just a little bit off. So let's see what we have for Squish now. I'm going to guess about 18 thousandths. Nailed that, huh? At 18 thousandths. With a base gasket, I did not do anything to the piston. So I'm going to leave it right there. And again, you can see how I set the arbor up, checked the arbor, and I checked it afterwards as well. And I didn't lose any square on the arbor. So the bore alignment to the base of the cylinder should be better than it was when I first started working on this cylinder, where I don't know if I took a picture or not, I may have. You could see one corner, when I made my first cut, you could see one corner didn't clean up. My hunch is this saw is going to run pretty good. Believe in the ports alone, because I want to make the point that compression alone does a lot. Porting at the RPMs this saw is going to run pretty much stock, probably with a limited coil. I'll get rid of this black thing and put a limited coil. I mean, it'll gain you some, but the compression is going to gain you more than anything else at that lower RPM. If I start wanting to get up into the higher 13s, 14,000 range and move the power band upscale, opening up the ports and changing the timing makes a lot of sense. But that's not how these saws are going to be run. So I'm sticking with compression on this one here. And again, it's an aftermarket build. You know, it's got OEM crank, better bearings, Nachi bearings, OEM seals. It was a wrecked set of 2166 cases. But like the tank handle is Farmertec, that's Hyway, piston's Hyway obviously. The bearing, the wrist pin bearing is Cross, and it has an aftermarket ignition for now, and it has an aftermarket side cover. So it's kind of a blend, you know. It'll have an aftermarket pull start, so we're testing some of that for durability. One of the reasons I wanted to change the compression is to test that darn thing, you know, give it a little bit of resistance. Now what I haven't figured out yet is on this build is what I'm going to use for a carburetor. I have come to the conclusion that the OEM boot is the only way to go with these. I've got some older aftermarket carburetors that just need something to do. Problem is I found them a little bit tougher to get tuned right, especially at the lower RPMs than the OEM carb. And that may alter people's opinion of the saw if it has an inferior carburetor, because it just simply won't run as well as it could with a good Walbro, you know. But I'll see what I've got laying around. Maybe I've got an old stock one I can rebuild and put on there. And this is basically testing the Arbor Run Out after I pull the cylinder off. So I'm still around the same 3 or 4 thousandths. Actually, it's 3 thousandths run out. So, like I said, it doesn't really change much the way I stress it because the cuts are so light. But I always do a before and after just to make sure that I haven't, you know, messed up a cylinder by somehow by accident having that arbor pop off of its true and the run out get to the point where now I introduce a bore misalignment. But as you can see, I can easily deal with 3 thousandths. That's within tolerance of the bearings of that lathe right there. So that's how I do it. I check before, get it right, set the cylinder on there, do my cut, and then check afterwards to make sure that I didn't mess anything up, because it's just very easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. And now we have a Hyway cylinder which has been trued up and decked with the proper squish. Well, it looks like I have to go to the junk pile. And I've got this salvageable, just slightly scratched up XPW top end. What I should do is take that thing and open up the ports a little bit and let it breathe, move its RPM up to the 13.5, 13.7 range by getting rid of that material. By the way, that's how you can tell it's the XPW, is that's 51.4, I think it is. So it's a little bit larger bore. But see how they blocked off some of the transfer port to kind of bring the power band down? Torquey saws, good saws, I like them. And just with an increase in compression, they just bark. Even without porting, they run pretty good. Guys like the RPMs, of course, they want to spin them up. It's not my gig. I like that lower power band, you know, makes it feel like a bigger saw. I don't know how good that carburetor is. Maybe I'll just take a look at the diaphragms in it and see, but I want to point something out though. When you start dropping the cylinder, look what happens to the intake relative to this. Sometimes you got to move a little of that material away, you know, because you got to make room for that. So I probably will. I'll probably just trim just a little bit of that material out of that tray just to let the intake boot settle down in there without having it pinched, possibly increasing the chances of it tearing in the future. See what I'm saying? These are Farmertec parts. And I don't know, a couple years back, I obviously thought I had a need for a bunch of 372 shields because I got a whole bunch of them, and they're encased with this protective plastic, which is actually pretty cool. It means they don't corrode, huh? Good group of people. Pretty sure some of this will rattle loose. So let's just review. Husqvarna, Hyway, Husqvarna, Forester, OEM, OEM used, 2166 John thread, Husqvarna Farmertec, including the cable. So that's what we have. Pull start is Husqvarna, ignition is Husqvarna. That's going to be a problem, isn't it? Get the Husqvarna handled, by the way. Alright, I'm going to give this saw a little bit of break-in time, and I think this saw here is a runner. I really do. That's a very nice running saw right there. Same technique with this saw. And see if I get the same kind of results. I don't think I will. I really don't think the clutch on this saw can handle the power that's putting out. From the way it feels, there's no question on which saw feels better to run. And that's this one right here that has the Hyway top end on OEM cases. It's not that that one feels bad. This one just has a livelier feel to it. You know, it has a much better throttle response. It runs a little cleaner, but remember that has an OEM carburetor, that has an aftermarket carburetor. So this is a junk pile build, and that's from a box of parts. This is nothing to sneeze at, and I think that with some development time I can make it run in a similar way. If you remember, I had to deck that cylinder as well, so they have roughly the same squish. There's your answer. I'm going to take a little breather and I'm going to bring up another subject. Not sure. Yeah, I'm going to bring up this subject as well. And one of the side benefits of this hobby, working with these saws, is your health. And that's not really something that's easy to quantify. But this hip replacement experience of mine brought something home and clarified a lot of things in my world, in my life, and some other things that have happened as well, and some people who I know who deal with some pretty tough issues. Life is short, live it. And one of the things you get as a side benefit of these aftermarket saws is they're cheap fun. And they get you out here. Look at this. I'm out here, I'm working up a sweat. I'm talking about a Farmertec versus a Hyway. Does it really matter which one's better? No. Both of them provided some entertainment to me, and it was fairly inexpensive. You can get that with OEM as well. Obviously, you can go crazy and take OEM saws and build them to the next level of performance, more so than you can aftermarket. Not everybody has the money to go buy a bunch of OEM saws and do the kind of things that I'm doing, or take them and send them out to have somebody else do them. But these are cheap fun. $200-300, you can come up with something like this. You can hack at it. If it blows up, who cares? Keep your OEM saw around for when it really counts. But it's an intangible is what it is what happens is you build something like that. I built that saw today. I wanted to come out here and run it. The genesis of me splitting this wood and coming out in the woods was simply I wanted to run that saw. I just was really curious. When I first fired that thing up, it had sort of a feel to it that told me it was going to be a good running saw. It did not disappoint, and we haven't even got through the first tank of gas. So even though I had to do some trials and tribulations with that cylinder, that was worth it. That saw right there was worth the effort. But so was that one. I enjoy that one just as much. And that one has half as much dollars involved, you know, because it's just a kit saw. That one there cost half as much, but it gives you the same kind of joy. You go through, you build one of these things, you go out and run it, you tweak it, you want to go run it some more, and now you're turning what normally would be work into something that's fun. To quantify that some, when my hip was ruined, because it's been gone for probably longer than I want to admit, and I waited way too long to get the thing replaced. I lost a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in pain. I let it get to the point where pain defined what I was going to do during the day, and that's waiting too long. I was almost 294, well, I was 294 pounds in April. And then when I realized I had to get the hip replacement, my doctor told me I had to get down under 285. By the time the date for surgery came around, I was down to about 282. Well, I continued working my diet, doing exercises because I have to do exercises to rehab the hip. Right now I'm sitting at about 261, 262, so I've lost 30 pounds. And a lot of that has to do with me coming out here running the saws, and if you watch some of my prior videos, me coming out here and splitting wood. I'm not pitching this hobby because there's a lot of other hobbies that have similar side benefits, but this one here, you get out in the woods, you enjoy the outdoors, I certainly do. The side benefit of having a good running saw, and assuming you have wood to cut, whether it's you have a truckload hauled in and you buck it up and split it, but you got to do physical work, and it's a lot more fun when you're trying out a saw build than it is if you have to go do it.